Materials supplied by Microsoft Corporation may be used for internal review, analysis, or research only. Any editing, reproduction, publication, rebroadcast, public showing, internet, or public display is forbidden and may violate copyright law.
All right, the door is shut, so I guess we're going to get started. Welcome. Thanks for coming today. Today we have our new visiting researcher who will be with us till the end of the June, Sheriff Malabakis, who is from the University of Sussex, where he's a senior lecturer. His work covers a variety of things, all having to do with bodies and embodiment and sexuality. A lot of his work is about gay men's health and sexuality. He's done a lot of work on HIV prevention and so on, and also a lot of work about male sexuality and pornography and so on. And what he's presenting today has to do more with his work on embodiment and touching the phone. We're super excited to have Sheriff with us this semester. I will just say that he's probably the only person I've ever heard who makes marks seem really easy and intuitive and fun and kind of sexy. So with that, I will hand it over to you to entice us with your magic.
Thank you very, very much, Nancy. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I will apologise now for the coughing and spluttering, because true to form, last night I started to come down with a cold, so I'm rasping a little bit, but I'm riding a pseudoephedrine high, and as long as we can get through this, before I start to crash, we should be okay. So as Nancy said, my work broadly kind of fits into a loose non-category of kind of digital culture and issues of embodiment. And the work that I'm presenting today is part of a bit of a departure for me in this realm. So I'm afraid there's no pornography and very little sex. So if you want to leave now, Charles and I understand. It's a tiny smidge, but not that much, unfortunately. But I've been thinking about smartphones for some time, and in particular the sense of touch. So I'm quite interested in how bodies touch and connect with technologies, and in particular the sense of touch, both the touch as in a physical thing, but also being touched by something as well. So this is part of a larger project that looks at the life cycle of smartphones, from design and how haptics get envisioned and a sense of touch and affect gets put into design work, right the way through to production and consumption, and then into decomposition, deconstruction, and the ways in which various toxins touch the bodies of those people who are responsible in precarious situations for deconstructing those. So at the moment, this paper is located kind of in the middle around consumption and everyday consumption. And I'll begin with three observations that kind of motivated this paper. And they're observations taken from both my professional and my personal life. And I'd imagine that each of you can identify with at least one of these observations, but I'm not going to ask you which one because that's too personal. So the first observation is my students, my university students. And I teach on digital media modules, postgraduate and undergraduate level, and on the undergraduate level in particular, they're very switched on. They come in, and for 12 weeks, each week they sit down, they've hopefully done their reading, and we have great discussions. And that's great, and they interact with one another. And at the beginning of every single seminar, I come into the room, and they're sat there, face down, heads down rather, looking at their screens and not interacting with one another. And this happens every single week. The second observation is chill-out parties. So this is in the context of some research interviews that I was doing with gay men around issues of sexual health, digital culture, dating apps, and sexual practices. And I noticed a particular theme emerging. A chill-out party is a semi-structured sexual and social event whereby guys get together and kind of hook up either there's a sexual dimension within it, and it's driven by dating apps and hookup apps such as Grindr, but they're also kind of chilling out, and one of the reasons they're chilling out is because there's various forms of narcotics being used as well. And in the interviews that I was undertaking, quite a few of the respondents talked about this kind of hypnotic state that they and others kind of got into when they were using their smartphones in these spaces. So it was beyond that simple utility of trying to find, their next sexual partner. There was a scrolling and swiping that looked like a distracted rhythm, something meditative, or as one participant said, comforting. There's something kind of comforting about this. So that's the second observation. The third observation is on the bus. So I normally live in South London, and for anyone who knows South London, it's not connected very well on the underground system. And so my husband and I use buses a lot. We travel around on buses a lot. And every single time we get on the bus, we go upstairs onto the top deck, and my husband pulls out his phone and starts scrolling through something. Now, on occasion, I've been known to engage him in really inane chatter about boring domestic issues, and it's all because I just want to see how long he can last before he gives in to the temptation in his pocket, pulls out his phone and goes, yeah, and looks away. And he settles into scrolling through the New York Times and Twitter. And I go quiet, and I'm staring out of the window, and I look around, and I realise that I'm the only person that's not using their phone. So these three different contexts in which smartphone use appears demonstrate a certain habituation, kind of almost like a reassuring activity that we engage in. And they're three very different contexts that are joined together by a temporal similarity, that of waiting. So of being between one thing and another, being between valued areas of time and space, be that waiting waiting at a party, waiting at a bus stop or on the bus, or waiting for a seminar to begin. These three different contexts demonstrate a close proximity to others. We're in close proximity to others, but in which we choose to turn to our mobile devices, having a preference for digital networks over physical interactions. So the aim of this paper is to explore the enfolding of smartphones into the rhythms and routines of everyday life. And I'm going to use two critical frameworks, because I'm greedy, in order to kind of analyse this habitual use of smartphones, but to place that individual use within a broader political economic landscape in which this use takes place. So the first framework I'm going to use owes a debt to the work of Donald Winnicott, the child psychologist, and the second framework draws upon writing to do with information economies and labour practices, including the work of Castells, Agger, Hassan and Bauman. What I'm trying to do here is to conceptualise smartphone use in a way that allows us to understand the intimate qualities of such activities, while simultaneously paying attention to the material circumstances that underpin them. So, with that extended introduction, let's get started quickly. So, D.W. Winnicott, Donald Winnicott, was a child psychologist, and he's responsible. I mean, he's incredibly important and still influential within the field of psychology. He came up with concepts such as the holding environment and the good enough parent, and he's particularly well known for his work on play and the importance of play within child development, ideas that perhaps today, even as lay people, we take for granted. He gained a lot of traction in the field of psychology, and his ideas have subsequently been taken up as an analytical tool in a range of disciplines and contexts. And it's Winnicott's concept of the transitional object that I draw upon here in order to begin my analysis of habitual smartphone use. So what is the transitional object? It's an object that provides a bridge between the emerging subjectivity of the infant child and the external world. So, for instance, Linus with his security blanket, or Stewie Griffin with Rupert, his teddy bear. The transitional object, in the words of Hurt, it allows a gradually assisting the child in making the shift from narcissism to object love, the valuation of others as full persons separate from the self. So what we've got going on here is the transitional object being recognised as the first, what we call not me object. Okay, so this is an object that facilitates an awareness of the self and the other. Yeah, this is about ego formation, and it also at the same time provides a site of trust and security and comfort. So it has two kinds of roles. Yeah, on the one hand, it's there to explain the world, as it were, okay, as there is something outside of me as the infant child. The world is not just all me, there's me and you and other things. But at the same time, it also provides a site of comfort, of reassurance, something to go back to. And we might think about the crying child who quiets down when they're given their blankie, or the child who has to go to sleep with a particular toy as a form of comfort. Later we can discuss what your transitional objects were in your childhood. But this is really important because this object not only helps the child embark on a process of self-identification and self-realization, it also offers a site of comfort and stability. And Winnicott comes up with a kind of a 7-point list to summarize the special quality of the relationship that a child forms with their transitional object. So the infant must be able to own the object. It must be both something that they feel that they own, but that everyone else recognizes that the infant owns. That's your teddy bear, that's your blankie. It must be an object of affection, but it's often subject also to mutilation. So think about just how disgusting those teddy bears and those blankies get. It must seem to move and to have a texture, to have a vitality or reality of its own. And really importantly, the first transitional object, that from our early childhood, is subjected to a gradual decathecting. Okay, so this is a slightly long quote, bear with me here, but what Winnicott says is, the object does not go inside, nor does the feeling about it undergo a repression. So those are two kind of standard psychoanalytic frameworks. It's not forgotten and it's not mourned. It loses meaning. Okay? And because of this, the transitional phenomena have become diffused, have become spread out over the whole intermediate territory between inner psychic reality and the external world as perceived by two persons in common. That is to say, over the whole cultural field. So what he's saying here is that because we disinvest rather than destroy or repress our transitional objects, what we might call the affective charge, that kind of emotional affective power that was once directed to these much loved objects, continues to remain open in our later lives. And it's that kind of lack of incorporation, that distance, that space, there's still this kind of affective feeling that allows us a space in which to kind of play with transitional objects. And indeed scholars have, sort of from a variety of different scholarly fields, the opportunities for future cathecting, for future attachment of these emotions to other objects remains open to us. And this is where culture becomes a potential space that resides between the internal world of the self, the psychic reality, and the external world of the other, the material reality. So these, what basically Winnicott is saying is that objects can come and mediate between ourselves and the external world. And this is where I see smartphones kind of coming in. Now, I'm not the first person to conceptualize smartphones, well, actually phones, as transitional objects. Ribak does it around intergenerational familial relationships. Kiefer does it around the sense of comfort in situations of unfamiliarity. But often they situate the phone as a mediating object between people, between relationships. And what I'm suggesting is that actually we develop a relationship with the phone itself. So the phone doesn't just mediate, the phone as a piece of technology, as a device, is a transitional object. And Roger Silverstone first wrote about media technologies as transitional objects way back in '93 in his research on television and everyday life. And he suggests that television at that time was a transitional object because, see the quote, it accompanies us as we wake up, as we breakfast, as we have our tea, as we drink in bars. It comforts us when we are alone, it helps us sleep, it gives us pleasure, it bores us, it sometimes challenges us. I don't think it's particularly difficult to see how this in fact actually also fits perfectly, in fact perhaps even better with smartphones than it does with television. It was definitely perhaps relevant to television 20 years ago, but today I think the key transitional object within our mediated culture is the smartphone. Because it's more intimate than television. We literally hold it with us, okay? It's with us all the time. It's a converged technology, which means that it serves multiple purposes, so it integrates into our daily lives ever more than television. It's with us all the time, and it reminds us constantly of our place in the world, operating as a potential space, as this space in between. Because the smartphone enacts what I call a kind of shuttling back and forth between our internal world and the world outside, symbolising at once both the omnipotence we experience in our psyche, okay, I am the king of my own psyche, and our incapacity to reconcile that omnipotence with our lived reality. So to borrow from Dovey and Kennedy, what smartphones do is facilitate an exchange between the subject and the mediated environment. But finally, perhaps most importantly here, they provide a form of escape as well. In being constantly with us, they provide an opportunity to become immersed in what we might refer to as a dreamlike state that both Winnicott and Silverstone allude to in their writing on smartphone objects. I probably just missed a couple of slides there. So the smartphone, I'm suggesting, is a transitional object because it's both me and not me. It's a part of me and not part of me. It mediates between these two positions, and it opens up a space between self and other. Sherry Turkle identifies investments that we readily make in the computer technologies we interact with, saying that our use of smartphones is not a symptom of pathology, so we're not deluded or diseased in this relationship, but instead offers another example of wanting to fill in the blanks, of wanting to relate to these inanimate objects and wanting to form a bond with them. And this relating is, I think, nothing less than an investment in the power of our devices, a power to hold us, to know us, and to be there for us. In the same way that we invested in those now long forgotten objects, those blankies, those toys. Arguably, this is the reason why we've become so upset and so agitated when our smartphones stop working, when they run out of battery, when they get stolen or otherwise abandon us. So I very quickly mapped out why I think we can think of smartphones as transitional objects. But the question remains as to why. Why do we create these attachments? What's the purpose? E.P. Thompson, the historian, once wrote that time is now currency. It's not past, but spent. And I'd like to sort of bear that in mind as I think about why we seek to fill in the blanks, as it were, in the words of Turkle, why we seek to form attachments with our devices. And I think that we have to look at the material reality for context of these kinds of relationships. Durkheim claims that personality is the individual socialised, and working from that, I think that we need to simultaneously understand the role that the social plays in the development of this relationship, just as we understand the relationship that we develop with the device. Gahir and Lloyd suggest that the mobile phone use is underwritten by economic and social structures which are specific to historical eras. And so I think it's important that we explore the specific social practices within the economic and social context in which they're produced. So we can't separate out our individual phone use from a broader sociological landscape. And I think time is a key factor here. The temporal dimension of the question is key. Why have we formed these relationships with these technologies now? In a kind of Winnicottian framework, we identify two types of time. Okay, so I'm going back to the infant. Okay, two types of time that compete for power. And Ogden explains that a principal function of the mother's early psychological and physical holding includes her insulating the infant in his state of going on being from the relentless, unalterable otherness of time. What Ogden's talking about here, in a highly gendered way, is the way in which children, infants, face a conflict between their internal time, okay, the time of play, the time of doing whatever I want, and the time of, they say man-made time, I would say the time of the world. So the time that tells you to get up or go to bed, the time that says that this is when you will eat your food and this is when you will not eat your food, the time that says you must go to school now, you must graduate now, you must grow up now. Transitional objects offer a support for this traumatic transition into socialised time. If you've got a child, you will recognise that fact that actually as you're trying to get the child to do something they don't want to do because they're busy doing X, you give them transitional object Y, which helps you to move them to the car or to wherever it is that you're going. So it helps and supports, provides this bridge between two temporal states. But of course, even when we have submitted to the rules of man-made time, that time doesn't remain static. We're always talking about life speeding up, where are the years going, so on and so forth. And Robert Hassan, talks about temporality being rooted in the social. It's subjectively and collectively experienced. It's impressionably formed and reformed according to context and circumstance and ideological position. So, in other words, as ideologies and circumstances and context shift, so does our understanding of time. And a classic example of that would be Greenwich Mean Time. I'm from London, so of course I'm going to reference Greenwich. So here we have legs astride the meridian. Giovanni Nani has written beautifully about GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, exploring how this colonial project, or rather the colonial project of the British Empire, was reliant on long sea voyages and which served to place Great Britain at this very centre of time and of the world. So Greenwich Mean Time is directly located around the imperialist project because we couldn't work on lots and lots of different versions of time. We needed a constant, we needed a centre, as it were. E.P. Thompson underscores this particular power of time and the power of time to shape work and to shape understandings of the political economy when he writes that the essential conditioning in different notations of time is provided by different work situations and their relations to natural rhythms. So we might, for instance, think about the way in which time changes, time gets recategorized, the organisation of time shifts with new working practices. So we've got the time card, okay, so the idea of clocking on and clocking off. Today I think we think so much about kind of turning up, we talk about the 9 to 5, for instance, and indeed we stepped beyond that. But for a period, that became the default way in which we thought about the division between work and leisure. We may well think about the technologies that are being built in order to survey and monitor the work and the production of workers today. So, for instance, little boxes. Little boxes on desks that record to what extent we are being productive or not. There was an interesting article on NPR the other day where someone was talking about technologies that check how often you speak to co-workers, because the more you speak to co-workers, allegedly, the more creative you're going to be. So in kind of the industrial period, we see this very kind of routinized formation of work time. Okay, this is the time that you start work, this is the time that you finish work, you must produce so many units in this particular time, this is when you will have lunch, this is when you will go home. Moving beyond the industrial period towards later formations of capitalism, we see new understandings of time coming in alongside those pre-existing forms, fitting in with the demands of post-industrial digital economies. And I'm thinking here about the work of Hochschild and Wachman and Agger and Colville, who all point towards new temporalities being created for new practices of labour and also for consumption, and for the production and consumption of new commodities, both material and immaterial. So the third image here, we may well assume that they are working, and indeed the kind of frowns on their faces, maybe they're working, and the times in which we work or are expected to work has radically shifted. But likewise, they might also be shopping on Amazon, for instance, which is what I seem to spend a lot of my time in bed doing these days. Okay, so not just labour and production, but consumption, purchasing, also happens at different times. Time, it's said, has had to be refashioned to fit the needs of a new global economy. So instead of those neat divisions of time, work time, sleep time, leisure time, lunch time, time is increasingly characterised by two distinct yet interrelated forms of movement. That of flow, the endless flow of time, and that of continual interruption. And Castell alludes to this in his work on the network society when he talks of the space of flows. And he maps out the ideal worker for this new digital economy as the flex timer. The flex timer who becomes increasingly malleable to a life of precarious work, where long-term careers in the same company become a kind of something of a bygone era, where labour can be turned on and off like a tap according to the requirements of a market that might operate thousands of miles away, but which can impact upon us at the speed of an email. It's the hallmark of this global economy, the outsourcing of labour, undermines these older relationships between time and between the individual and between work. So this ensuing precarity that comes through with this is often framed as an individual problem, requiring an individual solution. And how do we solve the problem of this constant precarity? Well, we just need to upgrade ourselves. We're constantly engaged in a process of self-improvement. So if there is any freedom in this current climate, it's the freedom to become better. And we challenge ourselves to become better, whether it's through ridiculously kind of, I cannot tell you how much I do not like CrossFit, mainly because I'm not very good at it. But that idea of working out in efficient ways, yeah, grabbing food food on the go, not even going out to get our food, but having it delivered by Caviar or Deliveroo or any of these particular services. We work more and we sleep less. We exercise as efficiently as possible. The device on the bottom, anyone who has a Fitbit or a Garmin or anything like that, will regularly tell you you've not moved in X number of minutes and whatever, which is why I'm pacing around at the moment to make sure mine doesn't go off. We travel the globe for meetings at the drop of a hat, and we're doing our very best to become as seamless and as fluid and as flexible as the economy that we serve. And of course, our smartphones fit into that economy, encouraging us to upgrade ourselves. So all of the apps that we have around brain training that Caroline Bassett has written about, and fitness tracking apps that are there to help us improve ourselves. They remind us constantly to be doing something, to be constantly thinking and planning and engaging, Indeed, at a very, very surface level, they've become masters of our time. So none of my students, when I asked them the question last year, none of my students had a watch on. Everyone told the time through their smartphones. So we've lost even that sense, we've given that over to our phones as well. But beyond the content of the phone, beyond the content of what's on our screens, the relationship that we formed with these devices also has a particular temporal logic. Because the smartphone has become a technology of distraction par excellence. Within that endless flow, the constant work of the information economy, often the way we use our smartphones is fragmented and interrupted. Think about sitting in a restaurant with a friend and they get up and you've been having a lovely meal, chatting, fantastic, great to chat. They get up and they go to the restaurant. And what is the first thing you would probably do? Probably pick up your phone. If you're anything like me, you will pick up your phone and start checking. The next time you're in the restaurant, don't do that. Look around at all of the other people where the other person has gone to the restaurant and see what they're doing. Okay? We use these technologies as forms of distraction, but they're also used at points where that flow of life becomes distracted, becomes stuck a little bit. And this fragmented and interrupted use also has a relationship to earlier forms of media technology, namely television. So Tanya Modlewski, back in the 1980s, was writing about daytime television and how housewives watch daytime television. And she was kind of going against the idea of television as flow set up by Raymond Williams. And she says that actually we watch television in a distracted fashion, or at least the housewife does, in between cooking and cleaning and caring for children and the social reproduction of labour that Kylie Jarrett has since gone on to kind of explore in relation to Facebook and other social media platforms. This idea of tuning in and out, of multitasking. And what she says is that that's actually a primer, a training ground for the ways in which we today are expected to work. So a similar rhythm appears to underscore our contemporary smartphone use. And what links these two relationships together, what these two sets of subject-screen relations have in common, is their material basis. A response to a particular political and economic situation characterized by a casualization of labour, the precarious and network organisation of work that means that we need to be answering emails at 10 o'clock whilst we're having dinner, which is obviously late because we've been down the gym doing CrossFit because we need to upgrade ourselves and be better, and the ongoing social reproduction of labour. Indeed, our smartphone use is often a form of labour. So Ben Agger writes about eye time and suggests that this is the dominant temporal force of our digital age. Eye time allows us to send emails at dinner, to move between private and work chat instantly, and to create more and more work and he suggests email begets email begets email. So we end up creating more work as we engage in work. Beyond the intrusions of work into the private sphere, leisure time also becomes co-opted as a commodity. So whether we're liking content on Facebook or uploading images to Instagram, we're engaged in the production of data that, as we all know, has an economic value. So labour and smartphone use are intimately tied up, just as the smartphone is a transitional object for us. But while at one level the boundary between work and leisure has been eroded, at another level we do experience differences in time. Yeah? I'm thinking again, go back to that restaurant, or go back to the beginning of a lecture or a seminar. Much of our smartphone use appears to share one thing in common. It occupies a certain type of time, what I refer to as interstitial time. So interstitial time acknowledges the fact that smartphone, I love this one by the way, gentlemen, you have seen this happening, right? Okay, I honestly, the bacteria that must be on those phones, germaphobes, worst nightmare. So interstitial time acknowledges the fact that smartphone use regularly occurs during moments of the day when we're between activities and we turn towards our screen because we seem to have nothing else to do, or because we're waiting, or because we're not quite sure what we should be doing. We may well be checking our emails or performing another work-based activity. However, such labour happens during these interstitial moments. It happens because we have a gap in our schedule, or because we are waiting for a meeting or to get to our destination. Sometimes we turn to our smartphones rather than risk engaging with other people. I know I certainly do that, or indeed, start a conversation with a stranger. Our smartphones take on a particular quality. They come into focus. They come into our attention. We seek them out in our moments of in-betweeners. Think about, it's like, oh, right, you're off to the bathroom, no problem at all. And out comes the smartphone. Yeah? Arguably at the heart of this behaviour, this turning towards the screen, I argue, is something to do with uncertainty. Interstitial time marks moments when we become uncertain about what to do next, about who to talk to, about how to occupy our time, about how to be in a particular space, perhaps even about our life trajectories. And that sounds hyperbolic, but bear with me. So Nielsen and Rossiter, B. Nielsen and Rossiter, refer to the uncertainty of contemporary life caused by the neoliberal environment outlined above, rather earlier, as a form of ontological insecurity. So we've got scholars talking about a sense of ontological security, a fear or nervousness about our place in the world. D. Nielsen identifies an existential anxiety. And Robert Hassan talks about distraction as a distraction from uncertainty. So this idea that interstitial time that smartphones are filling in is a distraction from certain uncertainties does have particular precedent within the current literature. So I'm suggesting that if smartphone use as a transitional object within an economy of distraction, if it operates within that, it does so by distracting us from the increasing pace of our lives today and providing a site of comfort and reassurance. Yeah? Think about how you feel when you kind of pick up your phone. It's like, oh, I'll just check in on Facebook, I'll just have a look on Twitter. Yeah? Paradoxically, the very same device that supports the speed fetish of contemporary life also provides an escape mechanism from it, however illusory that escape might be. And this paradox echoes the psychic shape of our earlier transitional objects, which serve a dual purpose, remember, commuting between the illusory world of the internal and the reality of the external. To go back to Winnicott once more, he says, it's assumed that the task of reality acceptance is never completed, that no human being is free from the strain of relating inner and outer reality, and that relief from this strain is provided by an intermediate area of experience which is not challenged. So it's okay that we have relationships with smartphones. Smartphones represent a contemporary example of this relief, while of course also creating extra burden for us by giving us further access to the world of work. We actively seek out distraction precisely at the times when we reach breaks or interruptions in the smooth flow of time. This is the ontology of interstitial time. And at such points when the unnerving speed of our lives is in danger of being revealed to us, it's at those points we turn to our technological comforters, our digital security blankets, and do our best to lose ourselves in the screen. So the mastery of the swipe that I allude to in the title is in fact our adult selves attempting to momentarily wrestle back control from a system that I would say we barely understand, a system that many of us feel disempowered by, in spite of being told that of course we're masters and responsible for our own destiny. So in doing so we move into a space of creative play. Momentarily we're giving an opportunity to ignore the relentless pressure of man-made time and engage in an illusion with our devices. That illusion being, of course, that we are in control of our lives and our trajectories. So in this way, smartphones occupy an ambivalent position in our lives. They help us to learn the new economies of digital labour. At the same time, they offer us a site of comfort and reassurance during moments of uncertainty in that particular new economy. They provide a carapace and a site of reassurance. As such, I think we're best to think of them as products of our environments and the method by which we cope with that environment. And I'll stop there. Thank you.